On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we take a look at some of the top news stories from the past week, as well as speak with the ONOS project as it welcomes a new member on its one-year anniversary.
Today's episode is brought to you by Telecom Careers, the #1 global telecom and wireless job board, telecomcareers.net.
Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, editor here at RCR Wireless News. We have a pretty good show for you this week, including an interview with the ONOS project as it welcomes a new member on its one-year anniversary. But first, let's take a look at some of the top headlines from the past week. OpenStack continues to see considerable demand for trained programmers, which has resulted in a growing push towards online course options. One firm specializing in the technology, Mirantis, said it witnessed a doubling in the number of students taking its OpenStack training program last year, swelling to more than 5,000 people in 2015 compared with its 2014 numbers. Mirantis noted it added 2 new courses and 15 new locations in 2015, pushing its availability to 85 locations worldwide. Mirantis said its programs are better agnostic and touch on OpenStack implementations across hypervisors, storage backends, and network topologies. The announcement follows word from the Linux Foundation late last year for its own online training course targeting OpenStack software, stating the move was necessary as accelerated adoption of OpenStack has resulted in a shortage of qualified OpenStack administrators. Also this week, a new report from vendor NFV claims more than $600 million was invested last year in SDN and NFV startups, and that the market also began to witness consolidation efforts that are further reshaping the space. Some of the larger reported investments included a $110 million investment into Cloudflare from the likes of Google, Microsoft, and Baidu, $100 million into Lumio, which provides security solutions targeting data centers and cloud deployments, and $100 million into Mirantis from investors Intel Capital, Goldman Sachs, and Ericsson, among others. Well, also this week, the ONOS project celebrated its one-year anniversary by announcing it had added Verizon as a member to the open-source SDN-focused organization. Verizon joins fellow telecom operators AT&T, China Unicom, NTT Communications, and SK Telecom in the project. While bitter rivals in the domestic telecom space, AT&T said the addition of Verizon to the group should help bolster the development and deployment of open-source-based virtualization platforms. To get more on the news, as well as an update on its progress, I recently had the chance to speak with Guru Parukal, who's the executive director and board member at the ONOS project. Guru started by providing some background on himself, as well as an overview of the ONOS project work over the past year. Let's take a look at the interview now.
Okay, Dan. So yeah, a little bit about myself. I essentially have 2 roles that I play. I serve as the executive director of a research center at Stanford University, where a lot of this SDN work initiated 7 or 8 years ago. I also serve as the executive director of Open Networking Lab, which is an independent nonprofit organization that was started by Stanford University and UC Berkeley, and that is where the ONOS project is hosted. And as a result of that, I also serve on the board of Open Networking Lab as well as ONOS. So that's quickly about my roles. In terms of the organization, as I mentioned, Open Networking Lab is an independent nonprofit organization. We founded it approximately 4 years ago to basically build open source SDN and NFV platforms and tools for the larger community to use and build real products and solutions with. And ONOS being our flagship open source project that we have been working on. And hopefully that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds great. Well, I guess maybe touch a bit about, like we said, you guys have been around for about a year now. There's been several releases during the year from your platform. Maybe give us a little overview on kind of what's happened with the organization over the past year since you guys were founded there, with the ONOS part at least.
Yes, so Dan, as you know, we open sourced ONOS on December 5th, 2014, so almost a year ago, a little over a year ago. And since then, we have had phenomenal progress made on multiple fronts. So let me quickly summarize the progress we made on multiple fronts. So the first is ONOS platform itself. So it has quickly, rapidly evolved and now has become a platform that is production ready and something that the companies are building real products and solutions with, and we expect some real service provider solution that will get deployed in 2016 that are built on top of ONOS. So ONOS platform itself has evolved and become production ready. The second thing that has happened during this year is that we have built number of what can be thought of as use cases or solutions that are enabled by ONOS. As you know, anytime you build a platform, you want to have a virtuous cycle. The platform enables new use cases and solution, and as you build those new use cases and solution, it makes your platform better. And that is the type of virtuous cycle that has started now with ONOS. So there are a number of solutions that are now taking shape. One particular one that is quite exciting is called COD, which stands for Central Office Re-architected as a Data Center. And hopefully we will talk about COD a little bit more later. But there are a number of other use cases, SDN IP peering, that is how you can build SDN islands and how you can interconnect that to rest of the internet. Then there is this multi-layer convergence of packet optical networks, and how do you build SDN control plane for packet optical network. And there are other half a dozen other use cases that we and others are building, and so these use cases have been gaining a lot of traction. Our community has been growing very rapidly. Right now we have 13 what we call partners that include 5 leading service providers and then 8 vendors. So when I say service providers and partners, these are service providers that cover different geographies, US, Japan, China, Korea, and so on. And these are service providers that are giving us real money, use cases, people, and their commitment to build lab trials and field trials and real deployments of ONOS. Similarly, we have vendors. These are the leading vendors in the telecommunication space across the geographies, across different spaces. They are part of the partnership as well. So in addition to those 13 paying partners, we also have 20 plus organizations that are collaborators, and these collaborating organizations are also contributing significantly to ONOS as well as ONOS-based use cases. So progress on the platform, progress on use cases that are getting now ready for field trials and deployments, and tremendous progress on the community and number of organizations that are participating and contributing to ONOS and use cases. So that is kind of the story within a year, and that we are very proud of and we are very happy. And we expect that 2016 will be a year when ONOS will emerge. ONOS and the use cases will emerge as basically the platform of choice for service providers, and number of use cases will get deployed in service provider networks.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I guess before we get off on the use cases there, I mean, like you said, you guys have a lot of support, it seems, from the telecom community, from carriers, from vendors. I know when you were formed back in December of 2014, like you said, I know AT&T was part of that. I get some other companies, NTT as well, as part of that too. I know for myself, talking to some of these carriers, they've talked very highly about what they've been able to do with you guys over the past year. So it does seem like you're getting, like you say, kind of great traction with the carriers, but also it seems like a great cooperation too between what you're offering and what they're looking to do. I guess we talked a bit about the importance of having those carriers on board, because it does seem like kind of this move towards SDN and NFV, at least in the telecom space, is really being driven by carriers and operators, as opposed to perhaps in the legacy of the telecom space, it's always been driven by the vendor community. This seems like it's really the operators who are really being a driving force in terms of this move towards virtualization.
Yes, exactly, Dan, that's very well said. And so all along when we did ONOS and the work that we are doing with ONOS, service providers and carriers have played a very important role. And we have started this whole ONOS partnership with service providers at the core of it. And these are the people that are providing not only money, they provide use cases and solutions. So we are building ONOS. And for example, as you know, ONOS is built for scalability, high performance, as well as high availability. And these are the requirements that the service providers care a lot about, and that is how we have architected ONOS. Now, if you look at our use cases also, they are also driven by service providers. These are the service providers like AT&T, NTT Communications, China Unicom, SK Telecom. These are the people that have been driving the use cases, and now they have made commitment to try out these use cases in their labs and in the field trials, and that is something we are excited about. I should also mention, this is the news that is going to get announced very soon, that Verizon has joined ONOS partnership as well. And so you can see Verizon is another top tier service providers, and Verizon joining the partnership is another big endorsement of what we are doing and the value we bring to service providers as well. And so this is something we're quite excited about, and have both AT&T and Verizon part of the same partnership is a big deal, and for them to work together and help transform the service provider infrastructure in the industry is very important, and we are very delighted that both of them are part of the same partnership.
Yeah. Anybody who's following the domestic telecom space would know that whenever you get AT&T and Verizon in the same room together and they're working together, that's an accomplishment right there. So that alone should be worthy of some sort of award from you guys for that. But yeah, obviously it's good to get everybody on board like that.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yeah, definitely.
Very good. Well, now let's touch a bit on the use cases, because it does seem like, in the telecom space, when it comes to virtualization, over the past year, 18 months or so, there have been a lot of organizations that have kind of popped up, whether it's, obviously you guys, OPNFV, Open Daylight, a lot of different organizations that have, that are kind of working in certain parts of this kind of big puzzle. I guess when it comes to the use case part of it, what do you guys provide, and how are you guys working with telecom operators to kind of advance what they're trying to do in terms of virtualizing of more of their network?
So let me give you more background and overview of something called COD.
Okay.
We think is a very revolutionary use case or a solution that is going to have a huge impact on the service provider infrastructure. So as you know, as a carrier like AT&T, they operate 4,700 central offices around the country. Majority of their CapEx and OpEx is tied to central office. Okay, and as you know, the central offices have evolved over 40-50 years. In a typical central office, AT&T may have 300 different types of equipment, and you can see that is what the source of CapEx and OpEx is. Moreover, majority of the equipment that go into central offices are closed, proprietary, and they are not easily programmable and virtualizable and so on. So that is what the problem has been. Approximately a year or so ago, we and AT&T started to ask the question, can we build central offices like how cloud providers build data centers? What does that mean? So it means two things. One is that cloud providers build data centers with a few building blocks, and they have this economies of scale and economies of commodity building blocks. So in a data center, typically you build it using commodity servers, leaf and spine fabric that is built using white boxes. Then you have number of open source building blocks, and then you build your own custom services on top of that. Mm-hmm. So we are building what is called COD with a similar approach as the data centers are built, using a few building blocks. Most of these building blocks are built using merchant silicon, white boxes, and then open source building blocks for software control. And on top of that, service providers can deploy their own services, can work with third parties or work with vendors to bring new services on this particular infrastructure. So the first COD that we are building in very close collaboration with AT&T and others is called for residential COD. What that means is that how this COD can support residential subscribers that come over GPON. Mm-hmm. And how can you support all the residential services on this particular COD infrastructure that are interconnected by GPON. Okay, and how do we use virtual OLT and some of these technologies in order to provide residential COD services? So that is something that we demonstrated at Open Networking Summit in June. Now we are building a reference implementation, and AT&T has publicly announced that they are going to do a field trial during 2016 of COD, and that is the residential COD. In parallel, now we are building something we call enterprise COD as well as the mobility COD. And by enterprise COD, what we mean is that we can use the same infrastructure that we are building COD with, but we can use it to support enterprise customers as well. So how we can support enterprise services such as VPN services, network on demand services, multimedia, video distribution, and all of these services that enterprises get from AT&T or other service provider. How can we support the enterprise services on the same infrastructure? So that is something that we are building, and we call that enterprise COD, and we are going to demonstrate that at Open Networking Summit. And another important element of enterprise COD is we are going to demonstrate how we can use the same infrastructure and same open source SDN control plane built using ONOS to do packet optical convergence as well. how we can control multi-layer packet optical networks using the same infrastructure and same SDN control stack. And the third variant of card that we are building right now is called mobility card. And what we are trying to do is that with the same card infrastructure, the same kind of a software stack, how we can support mobile customers as well. Of course, the access racks are going to be different for mobility, so they will be what we call virtual BBUs. So that these are the broadband unit, but these are implemented in software running on the standard x86 processors, for example, and they are also virtualized. And also then we do disaggregation of EPC. So S gateway, P gateway are also disintegrated, and they are implemented as virtual VNF, virtual network function, that are implemented in software. Another thing that we are demonstrating with the mobile card is what we and others call mobile edge computing. So we are trying to disaggregate and bring number of EPC functions in the edge of the network, and also provide some edge computing for the mobile customers and mobile streams as well. So these are few use cases. They are all kind of coming together in the context of card. And they can support residential subscribers, enterprise subscribers, as well as mobile subscribers for service providers. And that is a big deal. And we think as we go forward with card, it will have a pretty transformative impact on the service provider infrastructure.
Yeah, found it very deep there. I mean, I guess when you look at kind of the timing of all this too, I mean, as you mentioned, 2016 will probably be a big year for this. A lot of trials are going on with this as well. It seems like over the past, I kind of mentioned earlier, over the past 12, 18, 24 months, there's been a lot of different, fits and starts when it comes to kind of this move towards virtualization. I mean, people were talking about 2015 being a big year for it, and obviously a lot of advances were made in 2015. But from a commercial viewpoint, maybe not a lot has really happened. I guess as you look at kind of what you guys are doing and working with operators and the overall community of this move towards virtualization, I guess what sort of timing do you see for all of this to really start to kind of make its way out, I guess, beyond perhaps the labs and the trials and to actual perhaps commercial deployments? I mean, are we close to that point yet, or is it still, it's a pretty big movement. I know doing all this stuff, are we still kind of maybe a year or two away from really seeing some big advances, at least in the commercial viewpoint for this type of technology?
Yeah, so let me make 2 points in response to what you said, right? So virtualization by itself is not sufficient. So what has happened in the context of CORD is that it provides a comprehensive architecture. It's not only about virtualizing network functions, it is how do these virtual network functions fit into a comprehensive architecture and a comprehensive solution using which we can offer services and have a complete solution. So that's what we are trying to demonstrate with CORD. And that's what we plan to do field trial with AT&T with. So it's not about only virtualization. It is not only about SDN. It is taking some of these cloud, SDN, and virtualization technologies together and building a comprehensive solution that the service providers can deploy. And then with that solution, they can start to offer existing and new services on top of that. So that is something we are enabling, and we are planning to do field trial of that during this 2016. In terms of when is it ready for prime time, so I believe that the residential card that will probably go in kind of some significant production in 2016 itself. This is a speculation on my part, but I'm feeling very optimistic that once we do the field trial, it will be very easy or relatively easy to scale it and try to take it to the commercial production deployment. And I wouldn't be surprised if AT&T itself does it during 2016.
Yeah.
As far as the enterprise card is concerned, that is also something I'm pretty confident that you will see some field trials and some production deployment in 2016. Because in the enterprise card, it is essentially taking the existing card and be able to add enterprise services. There is not as much technology risk, or there is not as much business risk to be able to do that. So I'm pretty optimistic that even the enterprise card will get deployed and be in some kind of a production use by end of 2016. The mobile card, I believe that we will see some lab trials and maybe field trial potentially by 2016, but it will not be ready for prime time until most likely by 2017 or so. That is my guess. And I would think that other people may bring solutions along the same lines, and their time frame may be similar, or a little bit extended beyond what we are able to do.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. Now, you talked a little bit earlier, obviously, about the open source aspect of all this, and obviously that does seem like that's become a big part of this move towards virtualization. Obviously, these operators want to have platforms that they can use that they aren't proprietary, that they're not locked into a vendor lock situation. It seemed like, I know you guys recently also had a deal with the Linux Foundation as well to kind of work more with them, and obviously they're big on the open source as well. How important is that move towards kind of making sure this is an open type of community to make sure that operators are comfortable with kind of moving forward with what with what is a big evolution of their networks, and obviously they want to make sure that they can down the road be able to work with various vendors on this. So maybe talk a bit about the importance of the open source part of all of this this move towards virtualization.
Yes, I think a very good question and very good point that service providers are really betting on open source, white boxes, merchant silicon. So if you look at any leading service providers, that is what they want to build their infrastructure with: merchant silicon, white boxes, open source. Now, when you think about open source, you're 100% right that it's not the fact that the source code is open, that is not sufficient, right, for service providers to bet their whole infrastructure and their whole business on just because the code is open. So what that means is that not only it is open source, but there is a community behind it. There is something that is sustainable, and the community will continue to build and continue to exist. And so in that sense, this partnership that we announced with Linux Foundation is quite important. Linux Foundation has a history of building and shepherding open source projects and open source communities. So we are very happy. And yes, the service providers do care about sustainability and the fact that there is a thriving community to support the open source platform that they want to build on and they want to use in their infrastructure. So that's quite important. I should also mention, as far as ONOS is concerned, one very important thing is that Sienna announced last month that they are going to commercially support ONOS, and they are going to provide 24/7 support, and they are going to do all the things that one needs to do to support an open source software as a commercial product. So that is something they're quite excited about, and that's a very important milestone. You also probably know that Huawei has already announced that they are building commercial products and solutions based on ONOS. They are doing a number of trials with their customers, though they are not planning to support ONOS as an independent product, but ONOS is going into their commercial products and solutions, and they are feeding back all the enhancement that they are making to ONOS into the open source version as well. And that is quite important to any open source project, and of course to ONOS as well, and to service providers. There are other vendors that you will see over 2016 announce commercial products based on ONOS. I don't want to announce anything for them, but there are obviously something that is going to happen. So I think this is all very synergistic, where providers want to use open source, but they want to make sure there's a thriving community, as well as there is a vendor community that is wanting to commercially support open source platform as well, and that is starting to happen with ONOS as well.
Got it. Yeah. I guess when you look at all the different organizations that are also out there doing a lot of work in this, I mean, there's also, like I mentioned earlier, an OpenNFV or Open Daylight and different ones like that. I guess how much work is there behind the scenes between your organization and those organizations in kind of ensuring that there is, I guess, a common theme to what you guys are trying to do? Because it seems like all of you guys are kind of working in different pieces of kind of the big puzzle here, providing different parts of it, different support. But at the end of the day, all this stuff has to kind of work together for operators to really be able to advance this. Is there a lot of work going on behind the scenes, or obviously at different trade shows and events, to ensure that the different organizations that are working on this are working towards the same goal? I'm guessing the Linux Foundation is probably a central part of this as well. But I guess how much work is there behind the scenes to make sure that everybody is on the same page in terms of at the end of the day, this all kind of works seamlessly together?
Yes, I think you're right. So there is, when it comes to the overall goal, OP, NFV, ODL, ONOS, they're all driven by the same overall objective.
Yeah.
That is to help service providers build their infrastructure that is with open source and with merchant silicon, white boxes, and enable greater rate of innovation. Mm-hmm. So that is all, that goal is the same. In terms of specific approaches, there may be differences between ODL and ONOS. But these are, and I think that is very healthy.
Yeah.
That in order, because it is still very early in the world of open source SDN, that we cannot all come together and have only single solution. Because if there is a single open source platform, even that can become kind of a single point of failure or kind of monopolistic, and that's not a good thing for the community and for the industry as well. In terms of behind the scenes, is there cooperation? Yes, indeed, there is a number of conversations between ODL and ONOS in terms of how we can coexist, how we can enable common services on top of these platforms, and you will see more of that during 2016. But it is, I think, premature to imagine that there will be a convergence and people will come together on a single platform. I think, and that is not good for the industry. As much as sometimes people think if there is only one controller, that would be a good thing. In fact, I personally believe that that would be a mistake for the industry at this point in time. 3 years down the road, who knows? But right now, some diversity is good and some competition is good indeed as well.
Makes sense. Well, I guess maybe looking forward to, as a final kind of wrap-up question on this, as you look towards 2016, I mean, obviously, as you said, a lot of work's being done. You expect a lot to happen the next year. I guess, what sort of challenges do you see that could perhaps cause any sort of, late nights, long weekends for a lot of these companies? I mean, what do you see as maybe being the big challenge or two kind of going forward over the next year or 18 months or so?
So I guess there are 2 or 3 areas where, I worry about, or I want to make sure that we do it right. Okay. So the one thing is that whenever something moves from something like which is in demonstrations and solution showcase and lab trial to production, it is never easy. Right? I mean, there are many startups, many companies that can vouch for it, and open source is no exception. So during 2016, we are expecting ONOS and ONOS-based solutions to move from lab setting into production deployment, field trial and the production deployment. And there will be some rough edges, a number of challenges we will have to overcome. So that is one. Mm-hmm. Second thing is, it is a collaborative process. I mean, when you think about open source projects and the way we are doing it, it is not only one organization under one particular leadership. Of course, Open Networking Lab is one place where a lot of ONOS work is done, but there are now 20 plus organizations that are participating and contributing. So as you can imagine, bringing all these organizations to work towards a common goal and collaboration and all of that is not easy. So that's kind of the second thing. On one hand, it is good that all these organizations are cooperating and wanting to work together, but pulling it off and making sure they all lead to the good solid result is a challenge that hopefully we will overcome. And the third is that anytime there is a growth, managing growth is not easy, right? I mean, you have to manage it in such a way that you continue to deliver more value as you are growing rather than delivering less value because there is too much overhead and too much other issues that you have to deal with. So those are the 3 challenges, and there are too many opportunities, and we have to make sure that we succeed in some of them and build on that success as we go forward.
Well, thanks for watching this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, and make sure to check us out again next week.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.